omega-3s, what are we talking about?
Omega-3s, there are a family of different fatty acids. The majority of the scientific documentation for these health benefits for these fatty acids lies within the EPA and DHA.
Many dog owners hear the word omega-3, but we do know that not all sources of omega-3s are the same. Why is the source and the form of omega-3 so important when you're choosing a supplement?
That's something I think many people miss to understand. Bioavailability is how much omega-3 are you giving in the diet for the pet and how much ends up exactly in the cell membrane where they need to be to give those health effects.
So how is krill oil then different than any other fish oil? Welcome to the DAFY Podcast, the place where you will get expert-led and science-backed advice on dog health and nutrition. No more confusion and no more conflicting opinions. Just clear guidance to help you make informed decisions for your pup. Because when it comes to our dogs, they deserve the very best care. And we, as dog parents, deserve confidence in the choices we make for them. Let's meet an expert. Hi, Tonje. Welcome to the DAFY Podcast. It's so great to have you on today.
Thank you so much, and I'm very happy to be here.
You're very welcome. So, first of all, let's start by giving the audience a little introduction about yourself.
So, my name is Tonje Dominguez. Very happy to be here. As I said, I work for Aker QRILL Company, and we were previously Aker Biomarine just 1.5 years ago. But at that time, Aker Biomarine, it was both human products and animal products. So then Aker Biomarine separated out the animal part, and now the animal part has become Aker QRILL Company, and that's where I work with aquaculture and land-based animals generally. We are a fishing company, so we fish krill in Antarctica, and we produce that into a meal that we sell for aquaculture business and pet food. And I myself am a nutritionist, so my background is from one of the largest global pet food companies. I was there in various technical roles for many years. Then I worked in research and development in human food industry for some years. And now with Aker QRILL Company, my role is within the team of Companion Animal and Livestock Health and Nutrition. And I try to bridge the science and the technical insights that we have towards our own sales group, but also towards the customers so that they can innovate using our ingredients to promote products that has health benefits for cats and dogs.
That's amazing. That sounds so different to anyone I've ever spoken with before. Yeah. Lovely background. So essentially, from what I understand, companies will be able to purchase your products, whether it's krill in different forms, and then they can use it to formulate their products, and then they put on the market for example, dog's food.
Exactly. So we are an ingredient company. We only produce krill oil and krill meal, and then someone else puts that into a product and put that on the market.
Yeah, that sounds so exciting. And actually, krill is not very much talked about compared to the standard kind of other omega. It's like salmon oil and other sardine oil. So really excited to learn more about krill in general. For people who might not be familiar with Aker QRILL Company and they've never heard, what is it that you do? How do you produce the product? Why is krill in general used in pet nutrition?
Yeah, so Krill Pet is a brand name, by the way. So it is a brand name of the krill. We fish the krill in Antarctica and we produce a meal out of that on the vessel. So we have factories on the vessels. So pumped up the krill, it's immediately produced. It's cooked and dried, not added any additives at all. So it's 100% natural. And then it's packed into some nitrogen flushed bags for stability and stored on the vessel until they are collected by the freighter and sent to shore. During the cooking process, there are some nutrients that leaks out of the krill into the water, and we collect that as well. So the oil phase of those leaked nutrients is our krill oil that we put on barrels and sell as barrels.
Incredible.
Yeah. And so krill is this tiny crustacean. It's like a shrimp animal, but much smaller. And it lives, as I said, in Antarctica where we fish it. And it has these functional nutrients inside. So we're going to talk more about that, I guess. But the phospholipid omega-3, the astaxanthin, choline, and also marine proteins that are very beneficial for cats and dogs. So it's a very exciting raw material.
Yes. So interesting. Yeah, so interesting because it's not that popular. And so I'm really loving to learn more about it. And I think our audience is going to be too. It's just, I feel like it's just starting to become more popular now. It's not the general kind of fish oil that dog owners and cat owners will go for normally. So let's go back a little bit and talk about omega-3s, right, in dogs, because I don't think there is a better person than you to just explain that. So when we talk about omega-3s in dogs, what are we talking about?
Yeah, that's a good question, because omega-3s, they are not just one thing. There are a family of different fatty acids, and there are three of them that we usually talk about. So there is alpha-linolenic acid, ALA, there is EPA, and it's DHA. So the ALA, that is a short chain fatty acid that comes from the plant world. And for example, flaxseed can have ALA.
Yeah.
And then we have EPA and DHA. Those are the long chain fatty acids. They are found in marine sources. It could be fish, it could be algae, it could be seal, it could be a crustacean, for example, krill. And then it is a difference between those three, because alpha-linolenic acid is an essential fatty acid. It has some good benefits for pets, and it has, to some degree, some anti-inflammatory properties. But the majority of the scientific documentation for these health benefits for these fatty acids lies within the EPA and DHA. So that's really heavily documented how you can get health benefits from them. And I think those are the ones you should look for if you are looking for the health benefits from the fatty acids of omega-3.
And why are EPA and DHA so important for our pets as a nutrient?
Yeah, because fatty acids, we tend to think fuel, perhaps energy for the body, but the omega-3s, they are more structural. They could be built into the cell membrane of every single cell in the whole body of a pet. And in sufficient amount into that cell membrane, that can alter the signaling that the cell does, and that will positively influence the immune system, reduce inflammation, and things like that. And EPA and DHA, they compete with omega-6 inside the cell membrane. And that is key, because omega-6 is also an essential fatty acid, so it's an important one. However, we get a lot of omega-6 already from the diet, because there's a lot of omega-6 in plant ingredients.
Yeah.
And high omega-6 may do the opposite of omega-3. They might cause signaling in the membrane to increase inflammation, etc. And if you have an inflammatory process in the body that it gets chronic, that the body cannot resolve by itself, this is not a good place to be for the pet. So having enough omega-3 to cope with every lifestyle situations, conditions like diseases or just hard training and overload of the ligaments, etc., then omega-3s will be very beneficial for you.
Yeah, such a great answer. And I think you said something else earlier about linoleic acid, so omega-6 being also an essential fatty acid. And one of the things I see a lot when I work with dog owners formulating diets is that kind of gets missed as a nutrient. Like it's always like, oh yeah, we just need to add omega-3s, but no one thinks like how I formulate. I always make sure that there is like a proper source added in of linoleic acid as well as omega-3s. And it's interesting because, there is a lot of talking about, oh yeah, adult dog don't need EPA and DHA, like there's not a requirement in that diet, but I always tend to include it exactly because of what you said. It's, like we need that balance, because especially in like the food that we buy commercially nowadays, that very heavily in vegetables, carbohydrates, meat sources. Obviously, you get omega-6 from like the fat of the meat as well. So it's so important to keep that balance, especially when you have a dog that has a weaker immune system and things like that, to ensure that that inflammation level is controlled in the best way. So totally with you on that. So what are then the health benefits of omega-3s? Like what can that support with a dog or a cat or animals in general?
Yeah, as you say, so omega-6 is also the essential fatty acid. Omega-3 has its brilliance when you have an issue with inflammation. And that's where the balance, as you say, is so important. And the more inflammatory processes you have in the body, the higher the omega-3 should be when you are thinking about the ratio between omega-6 and omega-3. And there are some situations where that is particularly important. For example, mobility and joint issues, which are quite common in dogs. It is well documented how then omega-3 can calm down the inflammatory processes in, for example, osteoarthritis. And then you have the skin and coat. So omega-6 is really important for the skin. But as soon as you have inflammations or itches and things like that, omega-3 starts to become equally important to dampen those inflammations in the skin. And also omega-3 can cause a reduction in histamine release, which causes itching the histamine. There to dampen inflammation and reduce that histamine release could be very beneficial for dogs struggling with itch and inflammatory conditions. And then we have general inflammations in the body. You don't have to have a condition. You can just overload your ligaments or your muscles in your daily work. And like we do, we tend to work a lot on the computer, and you get hurt in your ligaments in your arms. And that's an inflammation that doesn't necessarily resolve by itself. And now dogs are not that much on the computer, but the concept is the same. So if they get these inflammation just by regular living, then omega-3 can do a good job with reducing that. We have eye and brain development in puppies, super important, with enough DHA particularly. And that is also in the fetus state where they are developed inside the mother. So if the mother gets enough DHA in her diet, especially the last trimester, that could positively influence the nerve system and the brain and the eye development of the puppy. We have a good cognitive function. So up to 50% of the fat in your brain could be DHA. And you have to get that from the diet. And the more then that you are able to supply that through the diet, the better the brain is to be at its best, and you have a good cognitive function. So there's so much that omega-3 can do for you.
Yeah, that's super interesting. That's one thing. I think I mentioned it to you. I'm currently doing a master in dog and cat nutrition at an Italian university, and we've talked so much about EPA and DHA. And what I've never had clear was the difference between the two as well, which is exactly what you just mentioned. DHA being responsible a lot more for brain function and cognitive function, and then the EPA part is more responsible for like the anti-inflammatory kind of properties, right? Yeah.
So EPA is the main driver for reducing inflammation, but EPA turns to DHA, which also converts back to EPA. So there's a circle there. Therefore, both can be important for that. It is also very interesting to see, for example, the science done by Hill's Pet Nutrition on joints. It is the EPA that is mostly important in reducing those inflammation in the joints on dogs, while on cats, they saw that DHA has a more prominent effect on the same as well. So it's a little bit differences between species as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Super interesting. And so that's, I think, why it's really important when, as a dog owners, you go off and buy a supplement, not all supplements will be equal, because it's really, really important to see, you know, based on the conditions that you're trying to target and use that as a functional ingredient for it. You always need to be careful about the type of, you know, whether it's more EPA, DHA, because sometimes what you buy is very concentrated and very different in terms of amounts of these two nutrients. So that brings me to a question, which is, you know, many dog owners kind of like hear the word omega-3s. There is like this, huge, oh yes, my dog needs omega-3, which is great. But we do know that not all sources of omega-3s are the same. So, you know, why is the source and the form of omega-3 so important when you're choosing a supplement?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's something I think many people miss to understand. So, and I don't blame them. So the source of the omega-3, we have touched into it. It's about the plant omega-3, which is the alpha-linolenic acid. It is a useful fatty acid, but not with a well scientifically documented health benefits as EPA and DHA has. Also, the conversion rate of alpha-linolenic acid to EPA and DHA are very low. It's below 10, and it is the same for mammals, for example. So it's not very specific for dogs, and cats are even worse at it. And then there is the form. So, and we're going to talk more about the form, but you have a transport vehicle for the fatty acids. It could be either a phospholipid or a triglyceride that carries those fatty acids. And the phospholipid has a different route in the body when it's absorbed in the intestine and goes into the bloodstream before it reaches the cells. The triglycerides is fat soluble, and it needs help being transported into the body. And then it goes through the lymph system, and then it's released in the blood circulation just before the heart, and it circulates some time before it goes to the liver to be rebuilt into a phospholipid. Because as we started with, this phospholipid is the building block of every single cell, and you cannot enter a triglyceride carrying nice fatty acids into a cell membrane. It needs to be rebuilt into a phospholipid. Yeah. And then go to the cell with its fatty acids. So the phospholipid is already on the right format that you need them for in entering the cell membrane. Yeah. And when you eat the phospholipid, it passes on through your intestinal wall and can go directly through the portal vein to the liver and then be sent to the cells, just to put it a bit simple. So it has already the form it needs to go directly into the cell membrane, and that's why we think it's so much more effective and it influences health in a good way.
Yeah, love that. I love that. And I know you've given a little hint from, you know, what I know about krill oil anyway. But before we talk about that, I wanted to just touch on something, which is bioavailability. Because that's kind of a word that gets thrown around quite a lot. And I think dog owners, it's not that they don't understand it, it's that you have to really, be into the kind of like know all the different, research, and you have to have the academic background to really understand that at a scientific level. But in simple terms, right, for a dog owner, what does bioavailability mean, and why is it really important when you're choosing an omega-3?
Yeah, right. So bioavailability is just how much, for example, omega-3 are you giving in the diet for the pet, and how much ends up exactly in the cell membrane where they need to be to give those health effects. And fat in general, of course, are quite bioavailable, easy digestible, and easy absorbed. However, now we're back to the difference between the triglyceride and the phospholipid. So if you give the same amount, the research shows that the phospholipid, probably by its shorter route in the body, and that it has already the right format to be implemented into cell membranes, those tend to be more effective and quicker to embed it into the cell membrane. So bioavailability then of a phospholipid omega-3 seems higher than a triglyceride omega-3.
Yeah, super important point, I think, because again, choosing the right form and the right type that, is just going to mean is your dog really getting the benefit of that supplement or not, as opposed to, like just giving a general thing that actually is not as bioavailable. And I see that so much with mineral and vitamin blends for like homemade diets and the forms of, whether a chelated mineral was used or a different type of mineral that, is not considered as bioavailable as others. So when I look at a supplement, I always really review that part, because if we do have the science that tells me the dog is going to absorb it better, then of course I will go for the chelated version. It's all a huge word, and there is so much to learn, and which is why, people go to university for it. But there are like a little simple tips and tricks that we can teach dog owners, I think, to start recognizing a very good, formulated product versus one that is not. So yeah, I love that. So let's talk about krill oil. So how is krill oil then different than any other fish oil?
Yeah, so mainly we are more focused on the krill meal rather than the krill oil that we sell now, because krill meal, there you have all the oil embedded into the meal. It's not, or it's protected by the rest of the nutrients in the meal, so that it's really stable and nice. And you also get these marine proteins along the way. So the fat in the krill are mostly, or a large part of it, is phospholipid. We also have some triglycerides. However, more than 80% of our omega-3s in this meal sits on the phospholipids in krill and not on the triglycerides. That's why those fatty acids that you really want to transport to the cell membrane are attached to the most bioavailable molecule, kind of. And that's why using krill meal that way seems to be a good way of embedding omega-3 into the cells, and we can measure that. We have done several studies where we use omega-3 index, so that's the gold standard way of doing it in the human section. And it really gives you a good picture of how much omega-3 you have in the body. We measure them in red blood cells. The amount of EPA and DHA in red blood cells are equivalent to the amount of EPA and DHA in other vital organs like cells in liver and spleen and heart, etc. So that's a very good way of knowing you have the omega-3 where it needs to be.
I love that. So I'm going to ask a quick follow-up on that, just out of curiosity for me. Is krill meal something that can be used as well by dog owners, like for example in a homemade diet or in a gently cooked diet, or can it only be used in kibble, to formulate kibble? That's my curiosity.
I can understand, and we get that question a lot. So that's absolutely possible. But we are dependent on that someone of our pet food producers put that krill meal in a box as a supplement and sell it as a supplement, because that's absolutely an option. And then dog owners can dose it as a supplement. But of course, it is an ingredient with a lot of volatile fatty acids. They are easily destroyed, so you need to really take care of them. And if you have them embedded into the daily diet of the pet, it's easier to keep them fresh and not oxidized, and really the best benefits that the meal can give you. But it is possible to have as a supplement as well. And let me add that the krill oil that we have now, that is the residue, the nutrients that leak out in the water, remember? And then we take the oil phase and put it on barrels. That krill oil is pure triglyceride based, because, as I mentioned, the phospholipids, they are water soluble, so they stay in the water phase. When we just take out the lipid phase of that boiling water, it's the triglycerides that we get that there. So there are products that gives you the krill oil with the phospholipid advantage, but that's sold on the human market. And how that's done is that we fish the meal that we usually sell for the pet food business, and some of that we also sell to this human company that is Aker Biomarine, our previous company. They are now only focusing on humans, so they buy the krill meal from us and they extract fat from the meal. However, then you have to add some technical additives, etc., to do that, and they put that in, or customers that buys it puts it in capsules. So it's like a slightly more heavy form to dose to the pets. And unless some pet food producers buy that oil in bulk and put it on a bottle that you can pump oil onto the pet food meal, it's a little bit more advanced. So using the krill meal, you get exactly the same oil as you can buy on a human market, but it's protected inside the meal and it's no additives at all. And it has other nutrient values as well. So that's definitely our most sold product, this meal that holds everything in one bottle.
Yeah, I mean, it's so incredibly powerful, isn't it? Because this is kind of like the biggest issue with fish oil that you have in general is the storage, how is it packaged, how long it's been there, has it been in contact with light? Why is it really important that, the fish oil, like what are the most important things to think about when we talk about packaging and we talk about buying a fish oil to really make sure that that product, and like you said, the, benefits, the nutritional benefits are preserved as much as possible.
Are you then talking about products for the end consumer, like people? Yeah. So there, how it's rebottled or packaged by the producer is really important. It should be done gently with not as much heat to trigger oxidation of the oil. And it would also be great to have a packaging that is not see-through. If it is see-through, a clear packaging, it needs to have these barriers embedded in there so that light doesn't hit the oil. It should also have a barrier that doesn't allow moisture to get inside. And also the storage should be a place where the temperature is not too high. So there are a couple of things to think about there. And also the producer should how high quality packaging they're using for you to be able to buy the product that is best stored before you bought it, but also can be well stored while you have it. There are these pump bottles, for example, if we're talking about supplements that are airtight, so that when you pump, you don't pump air into the bottle, but instead there is a bag inside or something that squeezes the product gently out without adding air, because air oxidizes oil. So there's a lot of different types of packaging that could preserve your product in a better or a worse way. So, and it's difficult for an end consumer to know what's the best thing. So I think doing some research and thinking about how the oil quality, but also the packaging is super important. That's a very good point.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it? Because you see all the time, like these plastic bottles just being sat there for like, who knows how long. And they all like you said, they're not dark. I come from Italy. So the way we package olive oil is like, for us, it's like a ritual, like I grew up like that. Like, if you find an olive oil that is in a plastic bottle, run away. If you find an olive oil that is not in a dark bottle, run away. Like my dad, I get my olive oil in Italy every year. My dad just sends me a video of the oil, the olives being picked up, taken to the place, squeezed, and then given to my dad by hand, because it's so important, right, to really make sure they're not like somewhere for like a few years or few months, and then they get to you. And I think in the commercial world that we live in today, where everything is like, being brought from all over the place, I think it's just really, really important. It's like, especially for oil that oxidize so easily, to really make sure we are really careful about that. And also, like you said, storage, like, if your house is really hot during the day, it will go off quicker. It's such an important point that you've made. Krill oil and salmon oil or sardine oil, from a nutritional perspective, why is krill oil, like what are the nutrients that krill oil has that salmon oil might not have? Why is it different and better, potentially?
Right. So for the krill meal or the krill oil, the biggest difference is how fish has triglyceride as the carrier molecule for the omega-3s, while krill has the phospholipid carrier molecule. And we've talked about the difference of those and how they are have an impact for the bioavailability and the effect. We have also done a couple of studies showing this difference. So you can see when we have equal amounts of omega-3 from krill, fish, and flaxseed. Krill is approximately double the effect for the first 3 or 4 weeks compared to fish oil. And then flaxseed oil is really low because it has a poor conversion rate, as we talked about, to EPA and DHA. Another thing that differentiate krill from these others is that more than 81% of the phospholipids, they carry a component that we call choline. That is a vitamin-like substance that is important for the brain. It's important for every single cell in the whole body. It's very important for nerve transmitters. So without them, you cannot do muscle movements and things like that. And it's important for liver health. It transports fat out of your liver so that you don't get fatty liver disease, a thing that can happen if you don't have enough choline, and cats are quite prone to it. And also it is important for a lot of metabolic actions in your body. And the phosphatidylcholine, that's the name of the choline when it's attached to the phospholipid, that is actually 12 times as effective as the general choline chloride that pet food producers tend to add to pet food to ensure enough choline. So it's really highly bioavailable.
Wow.
Yes, and then we have the astaxanthin. So we have in the krill meal, we have approximately 100 ppm of astaxanthin. It could be quite similar to salmon oil, but in the krill oil that we get from the vessel when we take away the lipid part, that has more than 10 times as much astaxanthin. That's why it's dark red compared to salmon oil. And as
with that word, I can't even pronounce it. What does that mean?
And so that's one of the world's most powerful antioxidants. And it protects every single cell in your body, especially those with a high level of fat in their membrane. And that is, for example, immune cells. So we see that a good antioxidant is very good for your immune system, and it protects your immune system. And it also has anti-inflammatory properties. So it kind of supports omega-3s as well, EPA and DHA, in being anti-inflammatory in your body. So yeah, so astaxanthin is a different thing compared to fish. And then finally, we also see that krill, because we harvest it in Antarctica, the level of contaminants are really, really low compared to fish oil elsewhere. So that's also a good reason and a good separator for krill versus fish. So phospholipid vehicle, astaxanthin, choline, and contaminants, maybe the biggest separators for.
I mean, it's a pretty good picture of why it's superior, isn't it? Like in a way, because I tell you, like already, choline is one of the most forgotten nutrients. My big focus is on my diet, not commercial food, but I see it even in commercial food, very often forgotten nutrient. The antioxidant part is hugely important because that's the whole point. Like when you go and buy a bottle of salmon oil or sardine oil, so if you look at the ingredients, that's normally always added back in. You're always going to see like a vitamin A or some kind of like antioxidant that has to be added back in to really protect that oil from oxidizing. So the fact that naturally krill oil already contains that, it's incredibly powerful. I love that. So yeah, you're getting me very excited about using it in general. So very, very nice. And you mentioned about, I love the fact about that you mentioning the fact that, whether it's contaminated with heavy metals, because that's, again, the conversation is growing. Like I see dog owners all the time that are really trying to avoid, tuna, salmon, like really big fishes, and try to focus on sardines or smaller fishes to try and obviously, no one knows, right? Unless you actually test that product, no one knows how contaminated they are. But we do live in a toxic world. So knowing that, krill oil is less kind of like contaminated with, based on what is fish, that's krill oil and krill meal. That's really, really important. Can we talk about something that I think people are starting to really care about right now, which is the sustainability part? So that's a huge topic right now, especially when we talk about marine ingredients. How do you guys approach responsible krill harvesting in your company?
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked that because it's so important. We do operate in a very fragile part of the world. And sustainability has been in our core and is kind of the foundation of our company, because without it, we are nothing. We have to be sustainable working where we do. So krill is the largest biomass, or one of the largest biomasses in the world. It is twice the biomass of humans. And you can even see the swarms of krill from the moon when it gathers. So it's a huge biomass. But the fishery there needs to still be carefully managed. And it is by an international organization called CAMLR. And that consists of 27 different countries deciding how to govern that. So with a strict and precautionary and based approach. So they have decided that only 1% of the biomass can be harvested. And that is also in just one particular area down in Antarctica. And if you look at the map, it's like slightly northwest of the South Pole. That's area 48. So that's the only place you can fish, and you can only take 1% of the biomass in that area.
Yeah.
And that's for all the fleets that are down there. They have to yes, exactly. And that leaves 99% of the krill left for whales and penguins and other species that depend on this nutrient down there. And independent research shows that the whale population is stable throughout the last 20 years of commercial fishing down there, which is super important. We innovate how we fish so that we are as sustainable as we can be. We have made a hose that you put down into the water that constantly pump up the krill, so that you don't have to take this trawl up and down. And that way you reduce bycatch from birds, etc. We fish in only 1 or max 2 knots, so that larger animals can easily swim past our trawl. And we have 2 safety nets with a very small mesh in front of our trawl, preventing bigger fish to swim into the trawl. So only krill gets in there. And all this together causes us to practically have no bycatch. We also allow independent researchers to use our boat to whatever scientific documentation they want, 1 week per year, to support Antarctic research in general. And finally, our operations are carefully monitored by independent control organs that are on the vessels all the time to ensure that we follow all the rules, etc. So, and that's just some of the things that we do to stay sustainable in this vulnerable area.
Yeah, I love that. You do not get that from a company normally. Like, even if you look for these information, it's so incredibly hard to get. So the fact that you're so transparent about it, I think it's one of the reasons why, how I reached out to you. I was listening to another podcast that you did, and that's kind of what made me really fall in love with, I need to have a chat with you, because I think companies like yours, they have to be talked about. So I'm really, really happy that you shared that with us. And I think it's going to help people really understand the kind of behind the scene and the importance and, the value that you've put into what you do, which is really powerful. I love that. And so I know you mentioned a few bits of research about krill in general. Is there any other kind of research or evidence related, with pet health that you think it's important or exciting to mention today?
Yes, definitely. So I have touched into our own research. So we do the base research, and I think that's really valuable because there are many nutrients out there that they don't measure if that nutrient actually worked. And you talked about bioavailability before. So even though you have nutrients in an ingredient that you think should have an effect in the body, there could be other stuff in that ingredient that prevents the bioavailability of the nutrient you'd like to have to be taken up in the body. So for us doing research with our own ingredient, knowing that this ingredient actually is very bioavailable is important. So we have done studies where we see that, yes, We can measure that with the omega-3 index, this gold standard way of measuring the omega-3 status, that the EPA and DHA actually ends up in the cell membrane. We see that choline is bioavailable and enters the bloodstream, and the same for astaxanthin. And then we also did some studies showing how it reduces, or it can reduce, inflammation and muscle damage in hardworking dogs. And then after that, now we have documented the base for our nutrient, and now we lean on external science, not done with krill, but shows the effect of when you have EPA and DHA implemented into the cell. And when it comes to that external science, for me, maybe the mobility research is some of the most compelling research done, like a large systemic review and meta-analysis in 2022 by Berbeau Gregoire and his colleagues. They put together 57 studies in cats and dogs, looking at nutrients used for arthritis. And what stood out there was exactly the EPA and the DHA. Those showed this significant and positive effect on pain management. And the studies were on quite high quality as well, several of them done by scientists from Hill's Pet Nutrition. Yeah. And interestingly, some popular joint nutrients like glucosamine and chondroitin that almost everyone has heard of, they showed strong evidence of no effect on pain, which really underlines the importance, of solid science. And it's so weird because these nutrients are very common on the mobility, in the mobility segments, and we know them. They are hardly marketed as good substances for joints, but the science is really not that strong.
Yeah, so interesting, because they're in every single possible, like if you look on the UK market and you look at any senior dog formula, or, like dogs that have like mobility issue formula, they always are in there, the two ingredients, aren't they? Even though, again, my point is that so many times it's such a small quantity that I'm like, is that really making a difference anyway? But you're right, EPA and DHA are literally the only one that vets are happy to recommend because of how much research there is behind them, or behind it. And it's the only two that they're like, anything to do with osteoarthritis, EPA and DHA is a must that you need to have in your dog's diet.
Exactly. I totally agree. Right. Yeah. And it is also very interesting in cognition. Now, our acknowledged researchers in both Hill's Pet Nutrition and Nestle Purina that has done a lot of exciting studies on how EPA and DHA affects the brain, the aging brain of the dogs. Put very useful products on the market so that we can have a balanced and effective product to use on our elderly dogs. That also I really, really like, and I am enthusiastic about that kind of nutrigenomics used for us as consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like it's such a big functional ingredient, right? And the reality is, like, when you look at FEDIA for AFCO guidelines, we do have guidelines for, puppies and adult dogs. We don't have guidelines for senior dogs. We do have quite a lot of research, but technically we don't have a requirement. Whereas if your dog hits this age, they have to have this into their food. We do have it for puppies, like you said, because it's an essential fatty acid to have in their diet, but not for adults, which is why I always formulate with EPA and DHA. But we should really, and hopefully we will one day, have a reviewed part for senior dogs, because we now do have so much research that kind of tells us it is good for them, and every single dog should be having it after, the age of 6 or 7, or whenever they enter the senior years, really.
Yeah, totally.
Love it. Love it. Amazing. So look, final question. If there was one key message that you would like either dog owners or dog professional or dog food companies, anyone that is listening to this conversation today, to take away from our chat, what will it be?
So that would be what we just touched into with that meta study, that omega-3 is actually maybe the most impactful nutrient that you could choose for your pet, for whether it's a puppy or it's an adult or a senior. It is good, hard evidence show that it works, and it is a very interesting nutrient to embed on a lifetime basis. So it's not a medication. You cannot give it one day and expect effect the day after, because it takes time to implement into the cells. But if you do use it on an everyday basis over time, you know you can have a positive influence on your dog's health. So that's the first. And if I can have two, because the second is
you can have as many if you want.
Second one is source and form, as we discussed. So look for EPA and DHA so that you know you have the fatty acids that has the most substantial scientific evidence to affect. Yeah. And you know, you're supporting the whole dog throughout the life.
Yeah.
So that's my.
I love that. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, it's the two most important point, isn't it? I love that. I love that. And if anyone would, love this conversation, again, whether it's, a dog owner, not really, because obviously, you guys, the business model that you have, obviously, to work with kind of food companies or supplement companies and things like that. But if anyone is listening to this and wants to get in touch with you to work with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
Then they can enter krillpet.com and they'll find my details there, so they can contact me that way. And also, if they're wondering where can I buy different types of products, we do have some overview over the companies and pet food companies using our products. We can try to help and redirect to products on the market available for them as well.
Yes, and I will put all the links that you just mentioned in the show notes when the episode goes live anyway. Yeah, Tonje, thank you so much for the chat today. I really loved it. You are incredibly knowledgeable. And maybe we'll do a part 2 in the future. Maybe, there is some more research coming out in the next, few months, a year. I absolutely loved it. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I love talking about this. So we could probably do a couple of more hours, but let's.
No, but you're on holiday. I have and enjoying the sunshine, but still on holiday. But no, honestly, thank you so much. And thank you so much for listening. And we will see you on the next episode. Thank you for watching. If you found this episode helpful, follow us on Instagram. And if you want first access to DAFY, join our waitlist now. The links are in the show notes.